Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a chicken tortilla soup with kind of these cheesy chicken wraps that will fry up. And we're gonna make some caramel chocolate chip sourdough scones. So let's start by getting our chicken. We're gonna kind of season it and throw it in the oven so we can shred it. And this is gonna go both in our soup as well as in our kind of chicken wraps. So I've got two kind of good sized breasts here. And I'm just going to make some slits along them. This is going to allow some of our seasoning to soak up and make it cook a little faster and make it easier to shred when it's time to shred. Okay, so I've got my two chicken breasts right here. And I'm going to first put a little bit of Worcestershire sauce on here. We're going to season these up with a bunch of spices so they have some great flavor. Just like a little drizzle. And then I do want a little bit of a smoky flavor to come in. I think it will be great in both the soup and in the wrap. So again, I'm just going to use a little bit of liquid smoke. Not even a half a teaspoon for it. We're going to give a good shake of garlic salt. And then I have some onion powder. And we've got some Southwest spices, a little bit of paprika. There we go. I'm just making a nice little dusting over the top of it. Some chipotle chili powder. I'm just going to use a little bit of this because it has a bit of heat, but I do want this chicken to be really well and flavored up. A little bit of oregano, kind of a nice sprinkle over. And these are a lot of these spices we're also going to be using in our soup as well. And then a little bit of cumin. And then I'm going to take some fresh lime juice, and we're going to squeeze a little bit of this fresh lime juice over the top of it. Here we go. And then we're going to give it a teeny tiny drizzle of olive oil, and then we're going to pop this in the oven to kind of cook up. Here we go. So I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees because that's what we're going to be cooking our scones at. But I'm going to have this roast in here, and this only needs about 20 minutes to roast up and cook all the way through, and then we can shred it for our soup and for our wrap. And this is just a quick way to do shredded chicken where you don't have to boil it and wait for it, and make sure it has lots of nice seasoning to it. Okay, let's get started on our sourdough scones. I'll put my bay leaves over here. And we're going to start by making our dry mixture and cutting our butter into it. So we're going to need our flour and our sugar for this. We're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So I've got 1 and 2. And then we're going to use a half a cup of granulated sugar. There we go. And then 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Let's put this over here so we have a little bit more room. So 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And we're going to first kind of give this like a little swirl all together, and then we're going to cut our butter into this mixture. So 1, 2, and then a half a teaspoon of salt. There we go. And I'm going to use my pastry cutter here. We're going to give this a little swirl to mix it all together. That way when we cut our butter into it, it'll be fairly even. Kind of a quick way to do almost like a sifting. Now, We're going to use 1 stick of cold butter. So it needs to be cold, not room temperature. And I like take it right out of the fridge cold. That's going to give you a fluffier, flakier scone. And I'm going to, I kind of quarter it like this, and then I'm going to cut these into little cubes. That's just going to make it a lot easier for me to cut this cold butter into our flour mixture, which again is going to give us those nice flaky layers for our scones. There we go. And cold butter, I guess, is also, it's got to use cold butter. So don't like take it out and then forget about it for like 30 minutes. Use it like I put it just out of the fridge. There we go. So now that I have that stick of cold butter cut in there, I'm going to use my pastry cutter here. Lost a bit. And we are going to cut this chunks of butter into our mixture until we have no pieces bigger than a pea. Now, you could do this in a food processor if you wanted to, but I just find it is so much easier just to use it. There's a little elbow grease and get it done this way. Because, you know, by the time you get your food processor out and then you do it, blend it, and then you've got to clean it. It's just too much work. You can also do it the old-fashioned way, and there's kind of 2 ways where you just use 2 knives and you cut it through the flour with 2 knives. Or you can do the method where you actually like smush the butter and the flour between your fingers to incorporate it.
You have a question. What's the difference between scones and biscuits?
So scones are slightly sweeter and I want to say a little bit denser. They've got more of a cookie. I will say, like I always say, scones are like a hybrid between a cookie and a biscuit. So they're gonna have again, more sugar than you would have in a biscuit if you're doing a sweet scone. And outside of that, they actually are pretty similar. I always just say it's kind of like a sweetened biscuit. And nowadays you can get like sweet biscuits. So, and you know, I guess there's 2 ways. There's ways you can do scones, which are like a drop scone, where you know, drop it and bake it up. Or I like to do, these are the cut scones, but you can also do that with biscuits. But it's really, I mean, I just say, I always figured the difference for me is, you know, the sweetness level. Okay. And now we have our flour just about cut through into or our butter cut into our flour mixture. I always cut through, make sure all of our butter comes out. Here we go. And perfect. Okay, now we're going to do our wet mixture. Let me grab a little bowl for this. And for our wet, we're going to do a 1/2 cup of my sourdough discard. So I'm going to add it in here, and then we'll feed this up so we can make some more bread, although I have some loaves to bake up tonight, which will be nice. Still trying to figure out what's for dinner. I might make a beef stew, but we'll see. I haven't figured it out yet. So we've got a 1/2 cup of sourdough discard. We're going to add in 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of cream, and we'll use a little bit more cream to brush over the top of our scones, but 2 tablespoons of cream are going into the mixture. And then we need 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and I don't think I set it out, so I'm going to grab my vanilla real quick. There we go. And we need 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And this is going to give you a nice, I want to say, kind of a vanilla base to our scone. It's going to be really lovely. And then we'll add in our chocolate chips and caramel bits. Let me grab a fork here. And we're just going to mix our wet mixture together. That way, when we add it into our dry mixture, it will already be all mixed up. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to make a little kind of well in here. We're going to pour in our wet mixture. Now this is going to make a dry, shaggy dough for our scones, which is what you want. You don't want a wet, sticky mess because we're going to press and fold these together. So I'm going to use my fork here to mix this all up. And again, we don't want to over mix it here. We're going to make a kind of a dry shag to it. And then I'm going to flip it out on the counter here and we're going to do our press and folds. Right, but we're going to add our caramel bits and our chocolate chips in first.
You have a question? Have you ever thought about making a cookbook?
I have. I actually get that asked a lot, and I think it's on my list to do. One of my goals for maybe, this year or next year. This year's almost over, so hopefully maybe 2026 will be the year. I have. I do send out recipe cards for my members, which I guess is a halfway step there because I'm getting them written down. I'm one of those cooks who kind of feels it, or chefs who kind of experiments when they cook and just like I have a good palate, so I kind of figured things out that way. But I'm working on writing them down. And the nice thing about these is I've got like a digital cookbook because I'm recording everything and I'll have the videos forever. We're going to add in our chocolate chips here and then our caramel bits. I'm going to use Ghirardelli semi-sweet because that's my favorite. And we want about 3/4 of a cup. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball what 3/4 of a cup looks like to me. And then we're going to do the same, maybe a little bit more, with our caramel bits. So for these, I'm using, they're literally just little balls of caramel. They're really delicious. I snack on them. But you can see they're nice and soft. So they're truly like caramel. They're not like a caramel flavor chip. We're going to do about 3/4 a cup of these as well, which is about 2 handfuls. There we go. And then I'm going to use my fork. We're going to mix those in just lightly with our fork. And then I'm going to turn all of this out and then we'll do our press and folds. There we go. So let me clear my working space here. And we're going to just take all this out. And don't worry if you feel like, oh, it's so dry. It's dry now, but that's going to give us the nice flaky layers in our scone. So you want it to look like this right now. Now we're going to do the important part, which is going to be shaping. I'm just going to make sure I have my space. So what we're going to do is you don't want to knead this. We're going to do is simply the press. So every time you press down, you're making a layer. And then we're going to fold kind of everything on top of it. So I call it my press and my fold. And every time you fold this new kind of layers on top, that's creating all of those delicious flaky layers in our scone. Now, I will say chocolate chips are some of the easier things to manage for mix-in. Blueberries, they love to run away when you are mixing them in. You almost need to do it on a baking sheet so they don't fall off onto the ground. So we're just going to keep pressing and fold until we've got all of our dough kind of is holding together for this. And then I'm going to shape this into 2 pucks because I like to make 16 mini scones instead of 8 big ones. And I just find that the mini scones, they cook up better and they're just a little bit, you can have one and you don't feel as bad. You can have 2 and you don't feel as bad. Okay, so I've kind of divided this in half and then we're going to shape this into a little puck. Now, you could also just make it squares. I like to do the circle and then cut it to make it look like a little wedge, but you can just cut it into squares. There's really no rule on what shape your scones have to be. There we go. And we want want this to be about an inch or so thick, and just roughly even, both of the pucks about the same size. But you see how we started with that dry shag and now we have these two perfect little kind of pucks. I'm just going to get any of these extra little crumbs on here and press them in. And now I have my baking sheet that is lined with parchment paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slide my pastry cutter right underneath this. And I'm going to transfer it to our baking sheet. And I always just like to make sure I go all the way around so I don't actually pick up and leave a layer or two on the counter. Sometimes that will happen. Okay, now we've got our two pucks here. And now we're going to kind of cut them in each one into eighths. So I always just like to kind of quarter them first. And then I cut through. Now, once you cut through, you're not done yet. For the best kind of cook up on them, I just spread them out a little bit. They are going to increase in size, but this is going to allow them to get a nice edge all over and cook up a little bit more evenly. So just, again, slide them out just a little bit. And then just tuck in any of those chocolate chips that may have fallen out. And now we're going to do the same with the other one. Now, if you wanted to, again, you could just make one big scone or one big puck and then cut it into 8 pieces and have 8 bigger scones. But I like the mini scones. They also cook up better. I feel like with the big scones, you have to cook them a little bit longer to make sure they get done all the way through, which means their outer crust gets a little bit drier, I find. Here, I'm just going to slide these out. And then we're going to brush these with cream and sprinkle them with a teeny bit of sugar. And that little extra sugar gives it a sweet sugar crunch on the top, which is delicious. Let me wash my hands real quick. There we go. And I'm going to get a teeny bowl. And we're going to use not even a tablespoon of cream here. I mean, you really just need enough to dab over the top. This cream is going to give our scones kind of a nice brownish color on the top of it. You could also do an egg wash if you wanted to for a shinier topping. But since I'm using cream in this recipe, I already have it out. No need to crack an egg and waste 90% of it when you can just use a little bit of cream. And so just take your little, little basting brush, dip it in and brush it right over the top of each one. And again, this is going to help give a nice kind of golden brown color to our scone. Otherwise, because we just use granulated sugar in it, it would be a much blonder looking, baked good. And then we'll sprinkle with a little bit of sugar. There we go. And just 3 more left. Okay. And for the sugar, again, we're probably not even going to use a tablespoon. I'm just going to go over and sprinkle a little bit on each one for this. And this is just going to, scones are, I will say, they are sweeter than a biscuit, but not quite as sweet as a cookie. And so adding just this little extra on the top just gives you a hint of sweetness that is really lovely without really making it a super sweet thing. And I think that's what I really love about scones is they make you feel like you're having a treat, but you don't feel like you're not going to regret it afterwards. Here we go. Okay, let's go pop these in the oven. So these are going to cook at 400 degrees for 18 minutes. Now, sometimes my scones have to bake longer if I've put in a really wet fruit in them, like a blueberry or like diced up peaches. But with these, they kind of cook the regular time.
You have a question. Do you ever use raw sugar?
I have used raw sugar before. Sometimes I find that it's rather gritty, and so I don't use it as often. It has a lovely flavor to it, but sometimes that grit doesn't cream up as nicely for it, and it does have more of that like a light brown sugar flavor to it. So I don't use it often, but I have used it before. Okay, while that is baking up in there, and I'm gonna just double check to make sure I set my timer. I don't remember set. I did. I don't remember it. It was 2 seconds ago, guys, and literally like 20 seconds ago. But there was this one time I forgot to set the timer, and I also turned off my oven a couple of times. So got to double check here. Okay, while we are waiting for that to cook up, we're going to get our soup ready. Been on like this soup kick this week, and I think part of it, I feel like it's soup weather here because we've been having like really cool days here, which is pretty unusual for Tennessee, and I've been loving it. Like waking up and it's like 50 degrees outside, so nice. And dropping and getting cold at night. So to me, I'm like, it's soup weather. We're gonna dice up our onions. I'm using a yellow onion. And I don't want my pieces to be too, terribly large. So I'm just going to do a smaller dice on it. And it will also allow those kind of flavors to come out a little bit quicker. So we're going to pop this in our Dutch oven here. I'm going to turn it on. We'll let it heat up. Once your Dutch oven is nice and hot, it really like stays warm, which makes it really great for cooking soups and stews. It stays consistently. We're going to add in about, I want to say 2 teaspoons of olive oil. And let's start simmering up our onions and let them cook. Our vegetables that we're going to be using in our soup for today is we've got our onions, carrots, kind of sweet peppers. You could also use a bell pepper, yellow squash, fresh tomatoes, and then I have celery and green onions. So just kind of keeping a nice kind of simple base to it, but kind of keeping in those kind of Mexican like, flares with the yellow squash and the peppers and stuff in it. The carrots and the celery are going to be here for like adding flavor to the broth, but not necessarily for the vegetable part, but really making sure we have a nice, lovely broth to the soup. And I will say, for when I make a homemade like chicken tortilla soups, I have kind of 2 variations of the recipe I make. One, which is what I'm kind of making today, is like a tomato-y based broth, a little simpler one. And then the other one, if you've ever eaten at Chuy's, which is a like a Tex-Mex restaurant, they're in love with Elvis. I love their chicken tortilla soup there, but that is a very brothy based soup with more of a clear broth. And I make that as well. I have kind of a copycat recipe for that. But today I'm just making more the traditional one for it, because it will be delicious, and I'm going to use my shredded chicken in both this one and in my little wrap that we'll have. So you can dip, instead of putting tortilla chips in the soup, I'm going to have kind of fry up our tortilla with our shredded chicken in it, and it'll be like a little burrito you can dip into the soup. So give you all that flavor, just make it a little bit different. Okay, and again, since my carrots are really here to add broth to or flavor to our broth, I'm going to do a smaller dice on them so that they'll get really tender and be less noticeable in the soup. There you go. And again, just using 2 carrots chopped up. I guess this would probably close to half a cup. I feel like I lost a carrot over here. I did. And then I just have a little bit of celery here. This is about like 3 stalks. I wouldn't consider it more. It's 4, but together, it's going to probably be 2 big stalks or 3 smaller ones. And I'm going to dice this up nice and small, just like with our carrots, because I want the celery to add that nice flavor to the broth, but I don't want it to be like I'm eating a, a vegetable soup like your traditional ones. But they do add important flavor profiles to your broth. It just gives you a better complexity to it. And even if you don't like eating celery, I always say put it in your broth. You can leave it like a full stick and then just fish it out so you're not actually eating it in your main one, but you want that flavor in your broth. That's how my husband is. He's like, I like the flavor the vegetables add to meat, but I don't want to eat the vegetables. And I was like, he's like, can you give them the flavor without the vegetables? And I'm like, no, you need the vegetables. Okay, again, nice smaller dice on this. I'm gonna grab a spoon here and we're gonna give our onions a little stir.
So you have a question. Do you prefer an electric or a gas stove?
Well, so growing up, I had gas. Here in our house, I have electric. And I actually recently, and I know this is a very unpopular opinion, I've been preferring electric better than gas. So whenever I go to my parents' house, I use gas. And I think it's because electric gives you an exact cooking. So I know when I put it on this temperature medium, my thing is going to stay that way, where gas can really depend on, the flame, and sometimes it can go up and down. So I have been really enjoying that. And I will say I definitely prefer an electric oven over a gas oven. That's not even like a thing, because gas ovens, they can vary a lot when cooking. But there are things about a gas oven that I love that I can't do. Like you can roast like your veggies on them. Like you can just put like a pepper on it and you can get that fire roasted. You can use a wok where the flames can go up to the side, where you can't do that on an electric one. So there are parts of it that I love, but I actually really enjoy an electric one. I did when I want to actually put a gas one in a couple of years ago. But our house is on a slab, and in order to do it, it was going to be so expensive. So I was like, oh, it's not worth it, because they were going to have to like bust up and put gas lines and everything. And I was like, too much work. But I will say, ever since it did, I'm actually kind of happy that it didn't happen, because after like cooking on my parents' one a lot, and then over here, I know my stove. It's very predictable. So I know exactly how it cooks, and how when I put it on this certain temperature here, or if I need to cook it really, really low, I can actually pull on an electric one. I can pull it off and only have half my pot on a burner to make it even lower than my lowest setting. So there's a couple little hacks, that kind of work well with it that you can't quite do with gas. But yeah, now also a drawback is gas are prettier looking stoves, and you can get the big ones that are like, 36-inch, 42-inch, even bigger. Electric, they only come in the standard size, or you have to get a commercial one, which is sad, because I wanted to actually get a bigger stove, because, I've got 5 kids, and sometimes I need a lot of burners. And you just don't have that with electric. You're stuck with just your 4 burners. So that's also kind of a downfall, but maybe they'll hear us and start making some more bigger electric stoves. Okay, right now I'm chopping up my sweet peppers here for this. You could also just use 1 bell pepper if you wanted. Or I love sweet peppers. I think their flavor is a little bit nicer than a bell pepper. Similar, but not as bitter. Okay, it looks like our onions are getting nice and gold. We're starting to get a little caramelization up through it, and they're translucent. So we're going to add in some of our garlic salt. I'm just going to add in about 1.5 teaspoons of garlic salt, which would be about 5 cloves of garlic, not garlic salt, of garlic. I don't know why I kept calling it garlic salt. It's clearly jarlic. It's how my brain works sometimes. There we go. So we're gonna put our garlic in there, and kind of saute it up for about 30 seconds or so, so that it's got nice kind of a caramelization on it. Don't cook it too long; it will start to burn. But I like to put it in right after the onions because once I add in some more vegetables, it's not going to kind of pick up those flavors. We're going to add in our carrots and our celery. We'll leave our peppers out for just a second. Peppers in soups, if you cook them too long, they can get kind of mushy. So I'm going to add those in after these kind of have sauteed for a few minutes. Here we go. Let that flavor come out, and let's prep up our other veggies. So we're going to use a yellow squash, and a traditional one doesn't have squash in it, but I always like to find ways to add vegetables to soups that aren't like, oh, that's vegetable. Like, yes, it is a squash, but yellow squash actually has like a pretty mild flavor. It's like a sponge. It's going to soak up the flavor of the broth, so it'll give us a bit more bulk to our soup without actually changing the flavor profile of it. And I'm not even like quartering it up. I'm kind of cubing it so that it will have nice kind of little bits in our soup. And then I'm just going to take out this whole middle piece because that will just get kind of gooey, I should say, or soggy. So we've got our things. You could also use zucchini here. I've also seen people use like sweet potatoes in their kind of chicken tortilla soup if they wanted to add another bulky vegetable. I feel that sweet potatoes changes the flavor profile of your broth. So I like to stick with either zucchini or yellow squash like I'm using today. Okay. These are sauteing up nicely. I'm going to add in my peppers now. We'll give them a quick saute. We'll add in our yellow squash. And then I'll start prepping my tomatoes. My tomatoes are going to be the last thing to go in. The corn we'll add in once we have our soup base, but the last vegetable that needs to be sauteed in here because tomatoes, if you add them in too soon, they sweat out all of their liquid and none of your vegetables will get a nice saute on them. Okay. So we can start cutting our tomatoes up. Now I'm using fresh tomatoes, but you of course could use, 1 to 2 cans of diced tomatoes if you wanted to. I personally just find that the fresh tomatoes make your soup a little bit happier, but this is one where canned also works great. And if your garden is popping full of tomatoes, this is a great soup to make. So I'm just doing not a super like small dice on them because I like my tomato chunks to have like a little substantial base to them. Let's get these guys going. And I'm not de-seeding them or anything like that or taking off the skin. We're going to just throw them in like this, the whole meaty body of it. Let's give this a quick stir and then we're going to add our zucchini in. Now before we add in our tomatoes, we're going to be adding in our spices and tomato paste. And then we'll add our tomatoes in because I want my spices to have a little bit more direct heat. And once we add these tomatoes in, they're going to be kind of submerged in the juice of the tomatoes. Let me take out this kind of core. Now, if you find that your knife is like slipping and sliding on the tomato skin, that means your knife is a little bit dull and needs sharpening up. So just get a nice honing steel and a quick little, 5 minutes, and your knife will be as good as new. There we go. So we have those nice and ready. Let's stir these in. And then I'm going to add our spices in here. So we're going to use paprika, again, about a teaspoon. This is going to give us a mild savory flavor to it, but it's going to add a really nice red color to our broth, which is great for with the tomatoes. chipotle chili powder. I'm going to do about a half a teaspoon. If you like it spicier, you can add in more, but this is going to give it a bit of heat. We're going to use a teaspoon of oregano. I'm going to kind of put it in there, fry it up. This gives a nice, earthy flavor to it. You can also use fresh oregano if you want to. I've got just a little bit of this Southwest seasoning, so that's about a fourth of a teaspoon, but we're going to use a little bit of our taco seasoning for this. There we go. I always like to kind of break it up. This is just Mrs. Dash's taco seasoning, so it's an unsalted one, but it's really delicious. So we're going to mix this. I'm going to let it start to heat up, and then we're going to add in some cumin and some onion powder. Making some of those pop out, and then of course our tomato paste. So cumin, we're going to add in about a teaspoon of cumin. This is going to give it a nice earthy flavor. And then I just finished up my onion powder on the chicken we were roasting, so I'm going to have to add in, open up my new one. There we go. And then we're going to add in about a teaspoon of onion powder, and this is just going to give us a nice, it's going to marry to our broth really well. Yeah, that's about a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half. It fluffs out more than you think. If I would have scooped it up there, I didn't actually put that much in there. Teaspoon and a half, not a tablespoon. One of these days I'm going to do a visual shake, and I'll probably be wrong, and I'll probably be underguessing everything. But in my mind, this is an Elsie Jensen teaspoon. You guys have to figure out what that measurement is at home. Okay, before we add our tomatoes in, I'm going to make a little well right here in the center, and that is where I'm going to add in my tomato paste. And we want about a tablespoon of tomato paste. I'm going to see if I can hopefully get enough of that out of here. I'm just going to get whatever I can, but ideally, you're going to use a tablespoon of it. But it looks like we're going to have about a half. That's just going to give you a really rich broth to it, a nice tomato-based broth without needing to use a whole lot of tomatoes. You want to heat it up first before pouring in or putting in our tomatoes because you want that flavor to sink in.
Yeah, what can you substitute in ketchup?
Ketchup has vinegar and sugar in it, so I would not use that for it. Honestly, if you didn't have it, just leave it out. Ketchup wouldn't give you the right flavor profile. Now we're going to add in our fresh tomatoes. And what we're going to do is we're going to stir these, but we'll need them to kind of glaze the bottom of our pan. We're going to be adding in our broth here in a little bit, but you want to make sure as these tomatoes heat up real quick, just scrape along the bottom of our pan, and the natural juices of the tomato are going to pick up some of those spices that are now much more flavorful and aromatic because they were heating up with that oil and that kind of high heat. And that's going to allow them to marry into the broth better versus just trying to throw them into your liquid. What will happen if you throw them into your liquid is they're going to sit on top. Okay, guys, let's go check out our scones. I'm going to turn this down. We're going to check on our scones. We're going to grab our chicken because then we can shred that. And then we'll be doing kind of the finishing touches on everything. So let me grab, get a trivet, and so look at our beautiful scones. This is our sourdough chocolate chip caramel scones. You can actually see the caramel like melting out of the scones, which will be delicious. And our chicken is ready, which is perfect. So we'll set these down, but you see how we've got this nice kind of golden crust on it. That is from brushing it with cream and sprinkling with a little bit of sugar. Here are those little caramel balls popping out, melting out, so they'll be just delicious in the scones with the chocolate chips. So think about like a not very sweet chocolate caramel cookie, but delicious, and all those flaky layers, of course. Will be amazing. Our chicken is nice and cooked, so we're going to let it cool for just a few minutes while we prep the rest of our soup, and then we'll shred it up, and then we'll be ready.
Yeah, I commented you're missing some onions there.
Ah, yep. It's of course I'm not facing that way, so I don't see it. Maybe I should start rotating my pot like I do when I make my bowls. I'm always like mixing and turning my bowl. Okay, we've got this kind of our base on here. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to add in 4 cups of water and a big scoop of chicken bouillon. You could use chicken broth if you want. I find chicken bouillon is going to give me much better flavor, and I can use less liquid to get more flavor out of it. I'm going to add a little bit in first, and then we're going to kind of scrape the bottom of our pan, just like we did when we added in those tomatoes. And because we sauteed our vegetables up first, they don't need to cook as long in the soup as if you were to put them in, raw on thing. And they're going to give them a much better flavor. So we've got our 4 cups of water in here. And now we're going to add in a big scoop of chicken bouillon. So let me go grab. And I want about, I'm going to say like a tablespoon-ish of it, or maybe a little bit more. This is going to add both the chicken like flavor profile to the broth, but as well as the saltiness to our soup. So we won't need to add, any extra additional salt. Here we go. So we're going to have that base there. We're going to let this come to a nice, simmer, let it kind of marry together. I'm going to add in my cup of frozen corn to our soup. And if you like beans, you could add in either pinto beans or black beans to the soup as well. Or you can just keep it without. We kind of prefer it without, so I don't put it in there. And we're going to let this simmer. And while that is simmering, let's get our chicken shredded, and we'll be ready to start making our wraps that we'll kind of saute up. Put this right over here. And now you see we have the lovely juices in our chicken there. We're going to shred this chicken using 2 forks, just a really simple way, and mix all of that natural juice into it. So I'm kind of just going to, there we go. Just pull it apart using your forks, and that's going to allow it to shred up. There we go. Because this is going to go into our soup and into our little chicken wraps. But I want all that broth to be soaked up into it as we shred it, because that's going to add all this delicious flavor. And this is just a quick way to do like an oven roasted chicken, where then you can shred it up. And 2 breasts makes quite a lot of chicken shredded. So, and I will say, this is also why I'm using the bouillon. If you're going to make your own chicken broth for this soup, you don't want to use chicken breasts. Or if you're going to do it, you have to at least use chicken breasts with skin on. The ideal piece of chicken for making your own kind of shredded chicken or chicken broth too is chicken thighs. They release a nice amount of fat into the broth, so it gives you more of a velvety, flavorful broth. And then the chicken, of course, stays really moist and tender. It doesn't dry out quite like the breasts do. A lot of times I kind of have the magic ratio where I get 2 split chicken breasts with the skin on, and then I do 4 chicken thighs, 4 big chicken thighs, or 8 smaller ones. And that's what I'll use to make like my own homemade broth, and then shred everything.
You have a question. What's the chicken seasoned with?
So here we actually used a lot of the spices that we put in our soup. So we have paprika and chipotle chili powder, garlic salt, oregano, fresh lime juice, onion powder, and a little bit of that chipotle Southwest seasoning, and I think a little bit of cumin. So we actually used pretty much a little bit of everything, and garlic salt, and then Worcestershire and liquid smoke. So there's a lot in here to give you a really nice, great flavor. Okay. I think we've got this fairly shredded up well. So we're going to put half of this is going to go into our soup that we're going to have simmering here. And then the other part of this we're going to use in our little wraps that we will kind of fry up. And that way they'll be delicious for kind of dipping into our soup. I'm just making sure they suck up all that good flavor. So I'm going to put again about half of it in here. That should be enough for our wrap. Let's give this a good stir. Here we go. And then as this is simmering, I'm going to just take a little taste and then we'll see if I need to add anything else to it. Ooh, really good. Okay, let's grab our tortilla. I got a little bit of chili powder on the back of my throat there. But dude, it has that nice heat from the chipotle chili powder. But I told you I'm going to spice this. But it's not super hot, but it gets you just a little bit. Okay, we need 2 tortilla wraps for this. And then I've got my my shredded or my triple cheddar. Now you can use whatever cheese that you want. I want the triple cheddar because we love our cheddar here. I'm going to mix it straight in with my shredded chicken here. So that way when I'm going to fry it up, it's going to have just a nice gooey melt to it. So we've got our chicken with it in there. And then we're going to add in some avocado. And this is going to, so like a cheesy avocado chicken wrap. I'll squeeze a little bit of lime juice over it. And then we're going to actually save part of this avocado to go into our soup when we kind of serve it up. Because you'll want to squeeze a little bit of fresh lime juice over your soup as well. So I'm going to peel off my skin here. And then before I slice it, I'm going to kind of cut it in half this way. And then we're actually going to dice it instead of slicing. And that way we'll have just lovely little chunks of avocado. And let's get a little bit of fresh lime juice in here. And that chicken should be all seasoned up that it doesn't need any other flavorings for it. And then we're going to build our wrap and we're going to start frying them up. So I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil in here and we'll let it start heating up. We're not going to need a whole lot, just enough to kind of coat the bottom of the pan so that where the wrap is touching it, it will get that almost like that fried tortilla, like chip flavor to it. I'm going to actually, before I'm going to flip my cutting board over because I don't want to roll it on the wet tomato juice because then it will make my tortilla wet. So we'll just flip it over. And now I've got a nice dry side. And we're going to put half of our mixture in here. And again, we squeeze part of that lemon juice over it. And fill this up with all of this goodness. Trying to make sure half of it goes in. Maybe. There we go. And then I'm just going to do my basic kind of roll up like I do when I'm making any of my little wraps that I make. So we'll start with it and then we're going to, put it in here. Not like when I do my little taquitos, which I use kind of the smaller ones. But now we have it like this. And then I'm going to kind of push it flat way down. And once it's hot, we are going to put the tortilla seam down first. But we need our oil to heat up first. So let's make our second one so that they can kind of fry at the same time. Once my oil's hot, I will turn it down again to that medium temperature so they don't cook too fast. And you'll see we'll have this big burrito And the idea I had behind it to kind of get you to the chicken tortilla soup base is that you would, after it's fried up, you would dip that into the soup. So you get the chunk, but it would get all that delicious like flavor and a little bit more substance to it. Here we go. And kind of tuck those in, and we're going to give this a nice little roll. Perfect. Our dogs are letting us know that there is a lot of people outside our house walking right now. Okay, let's see if this is nice and hot. Perfect. I'm going to turn it down to about a 4. And again, we're going to put my first one in, seam side down. I'm going to flatten this guy out just a little bit. We're going to place it in. Perfect. And we're going to let these kind of cook up. While we're doing that, and this will take hardly any time. They cook up fast, so don't forget about them because they'll burn pretty quick. We're going to add in our fresh green onions to our soup and chop up our limes and the rest of our avocado to kind of dress it up. I'm going to use 3 green onions. And if you had cilantro, you could definitely put in a good bunch of cilantro in here to give it even like fresher flavor, but not necessarily, especially if you're not a fan of cilantro, then just skip it. There we go. I find I have 2 spices that just don't grow in my garden well, and I think it's because Tennessee summers are just too hot, but cilantro and dill, I think they just can't thrive in the high heat that we have here because they always wilt and get, sad. And they make it about 2 weeks before they shoot up and are gone. So I typically always have to buy my cilantro and dill fresh. Okay, let's check on these guys. Looking good. This first one is ready to flip. Beautiful. So we've got our nice kind of crispy edge on it. And this one, just about. Kind of push it down. And we're going to let it crisp up on the other side. Let's add we'll save a little bit of green onions to sprinkle on top, but the rest are going right here into our soup. There we go. And let's slice up our limes so that we can squeeze this into our soup as well. The fresh lime juice is going to cut through the richness of the broth, the tomato base, cut through some of that heat as well from those chipotle chili peppers, and just add just a loveliness. And then, of course, fresh avocado chunks. It's amazing in this soup. So we're gonna, if your avocado is nice and ripe, you should be able to peel off your avocado skin fairly easy. It's that way you're gonna lose less of your avocado than if you try to scoop it out, and you'll have a prettier cut on it. Here we go. And again, I'm gonna dice it. So we'll just kind of cut it through here. And there we go. And we're going to give this a nice chop. So we have our thing. Grace. Okay, let's check out our things right here. Ooh, perfect. Looking good. So I'm going to turn this off, and then I'm going to grab a plate with a little paper towel on here, because when we take this off, we want to put it on the paper towel to soak up that extra, like any extra oil, to leave it nice and crispy, because you want that crispy fried tortilla edge on it. Now, you could always make little ones and make them more like a taquito or a flauta, but I've got the nice big ones here. Okay, let's get our cheese open because we're going to put that in our soup, and then we're going to get ready to serve up our dinner or our lunch here. So let me grab a plate. I'm going to turn my soup off. Let's grab a ladle. And let's get in business here. Okay. So let's start with our soup. We have our delicious homemade chicken tortilla soup loaded with celery, carrots, onions, peppers, yellow squash, fresh tomatoes, and then we made a nice kind of spicy broth using chipotle chili powder and paprika, cumin, oregano. We're going to top it with a generous helping of cheese because that's going to melt into the broth, fresh avocados, green onions, and then you're going to take a squeeze of fresh lime juice over it. And then we're going to serve it up with our fried chicken and cheese wrap. So we used half of our shredded chicken that we put in the soup to go into our wrap with cheese and avocado. So we'll have just a nice little thing and you'll dip it in. And then for dessert, we're going to have our chocolate caramel scones. You can see all of that caramel has melted through it, the nice flaky layers. Delicious. So that's going to be our dessert. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made. So chicken tortilla soup with our kind of cheesy chicken wraps and our sourdough caramel chocolate chip scones, which I'm super excited for. And we also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our cooking gear in it. It has our baking sheets, our knives, our cutting boards, our hex clad, all the different things that I use in the kitchen. I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.